That is, they can just take them and move them around in order to top up the numbers in different schools. So this is the, I have to say, very strained state of relations between parents of French immersion children and the school board, and to an extent the minister's department. And I think this is not peculiar to the Halifax Peninsula. I've spoken with French immersion parents in the whole of the metro area, and there is the same series of hesitations, problems, distrust, and bad feeling for many of the same reasons. Now, I'm hoping that the minister is going to be able to take the lead in trying to encourage better relations between the school boards and the parents. And I think I have to underline something as well for the minister, which is this. I have occasionally heard comments that suggest that French immersion is a program that has appeal purely to parents who could afford to send their children to private school but who choose not to do so. It's occasionally characterized as a substitute for private schooling in the public school system. And I want the minister to know that this is simply not the case. I want the minister to know that in my constituency and in the constituency of my colleague, the honourable member for Halifax Needham, there are a great many parents, often single parents, of very modest means who choose to send their children to French immersion because they see it as an opportunity for their children to get something of a more challenging education, because they see education as the way forward. They see education as a value. They want high quality, but they expect that the school board will foster this high quality. Now, what in the end, I wonder if the minister can tell me, is whether he is prepared to engage with the Halifax Regional School Board on the issue of French immersion in a way that will foster those programs, that will justify the acceptance of federal dollars, that will act effectively upon the agreements that have been entered into between his department and the federal government. And I want particularly to know whether he's been engaged in the issue of the fallout from the decision to close École Beaufort. So, Minister, can you give us your thoughts about the current state of play about French immersion in the school system in the Halifax Regional School Board? I look forward to your answer.
Thank you, Member, and I'll direct that question to the Minister of Education. The Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the honourable member for his question. And the challenge at times for a minister of education in particular is to respect the authorities that reside with school boards vis-a-vis the authority that the Department of Education has. And the school boards do, of course, have the authority to establish school boundaries and to take decisions with respect to how students, or how the curriculum is delivered within their jurisdiction. And that, of course, involves the use of facilities and the students that are placed in various facilities. Decisions were taken by the previous board with respect to Beaufort, My predecessor, the honourable member for Halifax Citadel, of course, had a very keen interest in that, and through her activities, the board did not disperse the students throughout the system to the extent that might have occurred without her involvement. However, the real challenge with respect to a minister and school boards is to recognize when it is appropriate for you to be able to interact with the board in such a manner that you can offer suggestions in a way that is not interpreted by the board as you interfering with their legitimate decision-making process. And that is something that is more easily achieved in one environment than it might be in another, or more easily achieved in one time frame than it might be in another. And that, of course, is always a challenge. We, as a department, do share the concerns as articulated by the honourable member that this indeed is not an elitist program. It is a program that is available to all students of whatever background they come from, and it is one which we want to be very diligent to ensure that whatever services students want with respect to immersion are available to the greatest extent possible. And to that extent, we of course are very anxious to interact with school boards in order to achieve those objectives. But again, I want to underline the challenge that exists for a minister. The minister does not have, and I know the honourable member understands this, but the minister does not have the capacity to intervene and to overrule school boards with respect to certain decisions that they have that are legitimately theirs to have. So that is a challenge that is before us. And again, I do appreciate the points made by the honourable member that it is a program that's available to all students, and we all have to be diligent to ensure that it is perceived in that light.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to recognize the member from Halifax, Chebucto, with 2 minutes left in turn.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Challenge, the word used by the minister, is indeed an appropriate word to use when thinking about French immersion programs. I want the minister to understand that parents don't regard his powers as being particularly limited when it comes to dealing with the school board over these questions. Parents see the minister as having a huge amount of moral suasion, a huge amount of financial ability to influence the school board, and indeed a large array of legal powers. What the parents are hoping for is that the minister will be moved to use them in an appropriate way. Minister, given that we have so little time left in this portion of estimates, I just want to make one final but I think quite important point to you about French immersion. The fallout from the closure of École Beaufort is going to have negative impacts on French immersion at all levels of the schooling system, all the way through to high school. This is certainly part of what it is that we're looking at. And Minister, as a parent of 2 French immersion students who are both at the high school level right now, I can tell you that I'm involved in this in a lot of detail, and I have watched severe erosion of the quality of the programs that has become available, particularly at the high school level.
Order. I'm sorry, member, time has expired for today's estimates, but the minister wanted to table a couple documents, and that's why I shut you off. And of course, Tuesday will allow you the allotted time. So I apologize for that, but I wanted to make sure that the minister had his items tabled.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to table, as I undertook to do, the active school community, the list of the schools, and the letter requested by the Honourable Member for Kibrit and the Lakes, signed by my predecessor to the chairs of school boards.
Thank you, Minister. Time has expired for estimates today. I would like at this time to recognize the government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee to now rise, report considerable progress, beg leave to sit again on a future date.
Thank you.
Chairman, on the Committee on the Whole House and Supply reports.
Committee has met, made considerable progress, and begs leave to sit again.
Is it agreed? The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if we could just perhaps hold everything, recess perhaps until about 12 minutes after 1.
12 minutes after?
1, yes, because we have the other committee still going for another couple of minutes.
Till 1:12. Is it agreed? Agreed. We are recessed till 1:12. The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in my place on a point of personal privilege. Mr. Speaker, you'll recall that back in 1999, shortly after this government took power, that we had an incident where we had a minister of the Crown, in fact it was the member from Chester St. Margaret's, who had informed a local reporter in his area of a freedom of information request that had been made, and indicated to him that he was aware of the contents of that request and that it had come from him. Shortly after that, Mr. Speaker, the Premier brought in a code of ethics in which he promised that the freedom of information system would be respected and that ministers of the Crown would not be made aware of who was making freedom of information requests of their government. There was even questions as to whether ministers should even be made aware of what information was being requested in those freedom of information requests. Mr. Speaker, today, this afternoon, in debate on the supplies of the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, the Minister of Justice indicated that he was aware of 3 freedom of information requests which had been made to other government departments requesting information which had nothing to do with his own department. Mr. Speaker, out of the hundreds of freedom of information requests that are received by this government, ironically, the 3 requests that the minister gave as examples were 3 requests that came from the Liberal caucus. I would submit to you, Mr. Speaker, that based on that and based on how the information was presented, that the Minister of Justice was aware of who those requests had been made by. When the minister was asked who had shared this information with him, considering that it was information sent to other departments, the minister claimed that he had privilege and did not need to divulge that information. Mr. Speaker, I would submit to you that other than cabinet privilege, the Minister of Justice enjoys no other privilege based on the fact he is not a member of the bar, nor does he have any of the other traditional privileged relationships which do exist. I would therefore submit to you, based on that, Mr. Speaker, that our rights as members of this House in knowing that freedom of information requests are being done in the proper fashion, that ministers around the Tory cabinet table are not chit-chatting about freedom of information requests that are taking place for other departments, and the fact that the minister has made it clear that he was aware of where these requests were coming from, the nature and who had sent them, I would submit to you is a breach of the codes of ethics, and it is also an infringement upon the privileges of members of this House based on the own legislation brought forward by this Premier. Based on that, Mr. Speaker, I would ask you to make a ruling in this matter. I would ask you to instruct the Minister of Justice to inform this House as to how he came about to know this information based on the fact that he enjoys no sort of privilege in withholding this information, and that you rule on whether there has been a breach of the Freedom of Information Act, a breach of the Code of Ethics, and a breach of the personal privileges that each members of this House enjoy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be very brief. And I wasn't present at the time when the alleged incident happened, Mr. Chair or Mr. Speaker. This would be something I think that should be quite easy to get to the root of, and we do have access to, and you could request that Hansard provide you early this afternoon with a copy of the transcript. I think that it is a very serious allegation that is made, and if in fact, as the previous speaker said, if in fact those events are as he reported, I think that it is a very serious matter, and one that I think you should give your very prompt attention to, as well as a Premier, Mr. Speaker. I think the Premier would also have some responsibility in addressing that issue.
I will certainly take the matter under advisement and report back to the House. Orders of the day, oral questions put by members. Question period will begin at 1:17 and end at 2:17. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. Mr. Speaker, only hours ago, the Minister of Finance announced this government is giving Cabinet the power to override municipal bylaws. Immediately, Mr. Speaker, the CBRM called our office asking for a copy because they hadn't seen it. It appears the elected mayor and council of CBRM found out about the government's intention to override their 2-year-old bylaw through the media. How very typical, Mr. Speaker, of the way that this government operates. Once again, it has a knee-jerk response without consulting the people who are directly affected by their actions. So my question is this: when did you notify the mayor and council of CBRM that you are giving yourself the power to override their bylaws, and why did you wait 2 years?
The Honourable the Premier.
I refer that to the Minister of Finance.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I tabled the Financial Measures Act in the House this morning. I had a bill briefing with the press prior to that the member opposite's finance critic was present. HRM and CBRM will both be informed, Mr. Speaker. This is the tabling of the bill. The bill isn't being passed today. There will be plenty of time for debate in this House and also for explanations for both CBRM and also HRM.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Speaker, 2 years after the fact, this government decides to take a position a new position, I might add, Mr. Speaker, because their position in this matter has been all over the map. In 1999, this finance minister tried to take a tough line in this House when he announced that he would sue the casino operators for late construction penalties. Now, they're ready to cave in without even going through the dispute resolution process. Soon, John Ham's government will have the dubious honor, Mr. Speaker, of being the only government in North America to pass legislation to allow smoking in public places, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the Premier is this. Mr. Premier, why won't you display the courage of the municipal governments and health advocates in this province instead of caving in to casino operators without a fight?
The Honourable the Premier.
I refer that to Minister of Finance.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, with regards to the law that came in today, that's been tabled today, Mr. Speaker, it gives the province the ability to make changes if they are required within 30 days. The reason that is important, Mr. Speaker, is that the contract that was signed by the previous Liberal government in 1995 with the casino operator has a provision in there if that we don't rectify a situation which comes up within 30 days, the province will be on the hook for substantial punitive damages, Mr. Speaker, to the extent of well over $100 million. Mr. Speaker, what we have done today is risk management. We have allowed the province of Nova Scotia to be able to react within those 30 days. The member may not agree, Mr. Speaker, but I believe the people of Nova Scotia do.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the Minister of Finance is getting advice from the same lawyers who told him the Laurentian Basin case was a slam dunk, Mr. Speaker. Really, the Premier and the Minister are just shadow boxing here, and they're so concerned, Mr. Speaker, with just making the former Liberal government look bad, rather than dealing with the issue. You know, and look, you don't need any help making them look bad. Mr. Speaker, they're going to give, they want to give Cabinet unprecedented power to kill municipal bylaws. Mr. Speaker, they are prepared to make the casino an outlaw oasis, Mr. Speaker. So my final question to the Premier is this. If today your Cabinet wants the power to nullify municipal bylaws it doesn't like, can you tell the House what's next?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. If the first question from the New Democratic Party and from the Leader of the Opposition is a suggestion that we have in excess of $110 million to give to the casino, then I would hate to think where he'll be with his last question in question period today.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question today is to the Minister of Municipal Relations. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Premier passed off my questions to the Minister of Energy and the Minister of Municipal Relations. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, the latest Minister of Municipal Relations is either intentionally misleading this House or he doesn't know what is going on in his department. It's really alarming, Mr. Speaker, when the Minister seemed unaware that the Maritimes and Northeast Pipeline doesn't come near Antigonish, even though I never mentioned either Antigonish or the pipeline. My question was related, Mr. Speaker, to resolution of property taxes for facilities related to the offshore energy project, the gas plant in Goldboro, and the fractionation plant in Point Tupper. The gas and fractionation plant, Mr. Speaker, went into production in 1999. After 4 years, Mr. Speaker, of Tory bungling, these municipal units are unable to spend money that is rightfully theirs because this government has not fulfilled its responsibility to determine assessment values. And, Mr. Speaker, the minister has obviously confused pipeline assessment with facilities assessment. Perhaps he could find someone in his department that knows the difference. Pipeline assessment, Mr. Speaker, was resolved because of the leadership of the impacted municipalities and a deal was reached. And my question, Mr. Speaker, to the minister, what is the status of the facilities assessment?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member's question was, and he, as he indicated, the Maritime and Northeast Pipeline has been resolved, and that is moving forward. The other issue that he raised regarding the facility, those issues have been meeting. They've met about 11 times. The process right now is in the hands of the SOE lawyers, and we anticipate to have the response very soon.
Now, Member Cape Breton South on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, my first supplementary is to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, the minister is not giving a satisfactory answer. As a matter of fact, he gave me an answer to a question I didn't even ask him. I'm asking him about where the facilities are. And my question to the Premier, offshore opportunity is passing us by because of the ineptitude of this government, Mr. Speaker, and municipalities are being denied tax dollars. The gas plant alone represents $350 million of assessed value. An industry is not being presented with a stable set of rules to facilitate investment. There's no certainty for this industry here in the future. And Mr. Premier, my question to you is, when can municipal units expect progress in resolving this issue so they can utilize the taxation to provide services and provide the stability and predictability that's necessary in this industry?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll refer that to the Minister.
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member will know that in the fall of 2000, we introduced a bill to deal with just that, to deal with the ability of accessible property through the oil industry. That process has been going on. Obviously, the SOE people have had some disagreements with that, with the municipal units. And as I indicated earlier, the process is coming to a conclusion very soon.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton South on your final supplementary.
Speaker, the minister just indicted himself and his government. He just told this House that 3.5 years ago these negotiations have started, and they're still not completed. But they're going to get completed, he states, on the eve of an election. 3.5 years these municipalities have been waiting. My question is to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, we have 3 rigs in the harbour, so one can safely assume they're not drilling anywhere offshore at the present time, or one maybe can assume that they're drilling in Halifax Harbour, because they're all out there. Mr. Speaker, 4 years under a Ham government, no new projects in the offshore, no gas distribution, no petrochemical industry, and municipalities that are unable to benefit by stable taxation, even though the negotiations have been going on for 3.5 years. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Premier, will the Premier take a leadership role himself in his office and settle this impasse so that the rightful dollars belonging to municipalities will get into their hands?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure what the preamble had to do with the question, but I can assure the Minister opposite that I am heartened by the fact that the drilling companies have in fact made drilling rigs available for the drilling programs that are going to occur this summer and the following summer. I would be very discouraged if, in fact, there were no drilling rigs out there, nothing to hire for drilling projects in the offshore. I think it's the confidence that many companies have in our offshore is the reason you see these drilling rigs being made available for our offshore industry.
The Honourable Member for Hants East.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 2 months ago, our party said that Orenda Recip was in serious jeopardy of closing its doors. And at that time, we said this company was planning on shutting down its fleet plant in Ontario, which builds wingtips. It was indicated they would bring these jobs to Nova Scotia, and it appears they were doing this to break the union there and transfer a handful of lower-paying jobs to Debert. But, Mr. Speaker, this company has been promising jobs in Debert for 6 years and has never delivered on its promises. So my question for the troubled Minister of Economic Development is he willing to put his shaken reputation on the line and promise that this time Orenda's promised jobs will actually appear?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's nothing shaken about this government's resolve to see positive business development in this province, unlike what the NDP are about, taking down companies, taking down opportunities, and harming the future prosperity of this province. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to assure that member that there are now 12 employees from Nova Scotia in Ontario taking training to work in the future operations in that plant.
The Honourable Member for Hants East on your first supplementary.
Oh yeah, just like you, Brookster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's the trade word here, future. The question is there a future for anybody in that plant? Mr. Speaker, my information is that Orenda's parent company, Magellan, has just struck a tentative deal with its union in Ontario. It's my information that the fleet plant is once again producing wingtips. Even this troubled Minister of Economic Development must agree with me that the chances of wingtip jobs coming to Debert now are not terribly likely, given the company is doing the work in Ontario again. So my question to the Minister, Is it his impression that Magellan's only use right now for the divert plant is to wring concessions out of its Ontario workforce?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, I cannot speak to what Magellan's activities are in Ontario, but what I can speak about is what their plan and intention is for here in Nova Scotia. That company invested at minimum $30 million to the $18 million from the federal and provincial. They had a technological success. The market wasn't there. They're moving on. They're putting new jobs into BERT. They expect up to 60 employees. They're starting with 12 trainees now, and it's wing components for a Boeing 717.
The Honourable Member for Hants East on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the minister, will he table in this House today a guarantee of those jobs from that company?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Well, Mr. Speaker, from the ridiculous to the sublime from the NDP again. What we go on is the fact that the private sector should be out there trying to do what it can with the market forces, and they're competing where possible. Nova Scotians have worked at that plant. Nova Scotians will continue to work at that plant. But if the NDP had their way, nobody in Nova Scotia would be working because they'd be driving them off the shores, and that's why we're here.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you.
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Environment and Labour. Mr. Speaker, the residents, some 900 families from Harrietsville and Williamswood, met with the Minister on April 9th with concerns to this proposed expansion of a recycling facility in their community. And since that time, they've supplied me with a report from the State University of Florida, which provides some rather substantive evidence that would conclude that if this C&D disposal site were to be placed in those communities, it would have an adverse effect on the groundwater, despite the fact the clay soils are quite significant. If they are, because the minister hasn't given us that detail. In light of that particular report, and I believe the minister has it, is the minister prepared to reconsider and have this entire process put to a halt?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I met with a group, I think it was on Monday or Tuesday of this week, and I told them that, I beg your pardon, it was last week, on Friday of last week, I met with a group, and I informed them that I would advise them as soon as possible as to what our future actions would be, and that letter is now in the possession of those residents.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have in hand here the legal opinion from M&E Legal Services from Bedford, which effectively state that the decision that was made by HRM in allowing the conversion of this from a salvage yard to a C&D compost area has not met the required regulatory process. I will table that for the minister. In view of this evidence, will the minister again concede that this entire process should be put to a halt and spare the residents, some 900 families, of the undue hardship that this has caused?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, the HRM held in excess of 60 meetings, as I understand it, with regard to C&D, and as a result of that have come up with 3 sites within HRM for the disposal of construction and demolition debris, and the one in Harrisville is one of those sites.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, as I've indicated on a previous day, the experts at HRM advised against this site proceeding. I further understand that the minister has had deliberations with his cabinet colleagues on this very issue, and in light of the fact that one of the HRM councillors is now contemplating running for the Conservative Party, that the government is trying to find a way out of this particular issue. You now have considerable evidence here before you today, sir. Would you please put this entire process to an end and help the residents of these two communities.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, there is a process that the Department of Environment and Labour follows when approving sites such as the one out in Harrietsville, and that will be followed.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister... the Finance Minister was embarrassed last year when a reporter discovered that his budget had underestimated doubtful accounts by millions of dollars. He was so embarrassed, Mr. Speaker, that this year he's yanked that line item for doubtful accounts from the budget altogether. It's now nowhere to be found anywhere in the budget documents. So my question to the Minister of Finance, for how long has it been government policy to drop embarrassing items out of the budget documents?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, there has been no change.
Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, that's untrue, and the minister knows it, and it gets worse, Mr. Speaker, because both that minister and the Premier knew that this line item was understated for more than one budget. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to table a document from an internal meeting from senior staff from the Premier's office and other senior government officials. And this document says, quote, provisions for doubtful accounts in the estimates is not sufficient, end of quote. That meeting was attended by, among other people, the Premier's deputy minister. And yet the minister went ahead that year and the year after, knowing that that item was wrong, and stating it anyway. So my question to the Minister of Finance, for how long has it been government policy to know that a line item in budget is wrong, but to say it anyway?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, providing for doubtful accounts is a process that estimates as to what is going to occur in the next year. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that overall our development strategy as a province has been excellent. Many of the accounts that have come forward, especially handled by NSBI, have done well. And the estimates that we have tabled this year, it makes provisions for not for doubtful accounts, for write-offs of doubtful accounts, Mr. Speaker, and we're pleased with the ones that we put forward.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is a serious matter because the document that I've tabled shows the Premier's senior staff, including the Deputy Minister to the Premier, knew that the information in at least 2 budgets was wrong. The Premier and the Minister of Finance must have known this. So my question is to the Premier. When did your Deputy Minister tell you that your government was dramatically understating doubtful accounts in the budget?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member's opposite question would have some validity if, in fact, we were not able to meet our targets. And I can point out to the member opposite that the budget that we tabled last year had a surplus of just over $1 million. And because the budget and the estimates were so accurate and so conservative, that surplus has grown to over $14 million.
Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Purposely underestimating doubtful accounts put this government in a position where it knowingly tabled an unbalanced budget last year. But that's last year. What about this year? Well, we don't know because that line item has been completely yanked from the budget. It no longer appears. So I'd like to ask the Premier this question. Does the provision for doubtful accounts, wherever they're hidden in the government's books, does it include a $9 million provision for a troubled and underperforming engine manufacturer named Orenda Recip?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I refer that to the Minister of Finance.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, this is more a question for the estimates rather than his in question period. But I do want to say, Mr. Speaker, that many of the accounts that the province of Nova Scotia carries on its books have had its value, its receivable written down in previous years. And that is a fact, Mr. Speaker. In regards to the specific one that he's talked about, I am sure that it was written off in previous, not written off, it was devalued in previous years, but it's a valid question. And without having the information at my fingertips, I will endeavor to get the information.
Now, member for Halifax Fairview on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will read from the summary from the same meeting from August 2001, attended by Gordon Gillis, the Premier's Deputy Minister, and Maura MacLeod from the Treasury and Policy Board, among other people. Right after it points out the provisions for doubtful accounts are underestimated, it gives an example, and it says, quote, currently there is an exposure of approximately $2 to $3 million from the Debert engine aircraft manufacturer Orenda. End of quote. So my question to the Premier, will the Premier confirm that he and his most senior staff knew 2 years ago that Orenda was a write-off?
Order, please. I believe the honourable member for Halifax Fairview already tabled that, did he not? Did you? Order, please. The honourable member for Halifax Fairview, you did table that document you're reading from?
Yes, I will. I did table one version. This is a slightly different version.
Ask the member to table that as well. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's a sorry state of affairs when the opposition party is concerned about leaked documents and absolutely refuses to discuss results. The government is concerned about results. The people of Nova Scotia are concerned about results. We have known for some time, Mr. Speaker, that the Orenda deal has been very, very problematic. But the results are, Mr. Speaker, that we have taken the budget last year and delivered not only the surplus that was called for, but a surplus that is much bigger. The results speak for themselves.
The honourable member for Halifax Fairview and your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, anything that I could say in response to that answer from the Premier would be unparliamentary, because I would accuse him of something that I'm not allowed to say in this House. The Premier and his senior staff knew the facts and did not state those facts in the budget documents, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not allowed to use the word that describes that kind of action. This is about integrity, Premier. It's about integrity. Mr. Speaker, under accounting principles, the debt must be written off in the year the government concludes it is no longer collectible. To the Finance Minister, I would say that your colleague in Economic Development yesterday called the Orenda loan, quote, potentially an extremely large write-off, end of quote. So my question to the Premier is, when will this government admit that $9 million has to be written off in this year's accounts and that this year's budget is not balanced?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much. Just scant moments ago, I heard the Minister of Finance say to the member opposite that he would research when, in fact, the government acknowledged on the books of the province the loss from the Orenda deal. He will provide you with that information. And I would certainly caution the member opposite, before he starts hurling innuendos around the room, that he hears the proper information. He does not seem to be constrained by fact.
The honourable member. Order, please. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, there has been no definite solution given to the parents and children of Barrington High School. And in case the Minister has forgotten, the children there are getting sick because of a sick building. Mr. Speaker, the Minister has already said in this House that he has received a report on the school, and I believe he should table that report, Mr. Speaker. The Minister has also said he has approved additional studies to be done on Barrington High. So my question to the Minister is, Mr. Speaker, how many reports does your government need to tell you these children are getting sick? How many studies before your government, Mr. Minister, will finally act?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. Our concern, of course, is to ensure that the students are in a healthy and safe environment, and that's our #1 priority. With respect to the decisions that need to be taken relative to the future of the Barrington Municipal High School, it is very important that we understand, to the extent possible, the source of the difficulties that are arising in that school. And as long as those who we have engaged to assist us in examining that request some time to further study the matter so that they can provide us with more precise information, we believe that it is appropriate for us to enable them to conduct those studies and provide us with as precise information as it is possible for them to gather. Thank you.
Now, Member Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Education Act clearly states that children have a right to a safe learning environment. That's right. Mr. Speaker, I understand that the situation can't be solved overnight, but Mr. Speaker, the honourable member has known about this school since he became a minister over 3 months ago, and the previous minister knew about this school for some time as well, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the Education Minister is, will the minister please tell us when a decision is going to be made with respect to the future of Barrington High School so the parents can begin to plan for their children's future?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the honourable member for the question. Mr. Speaker, we will make a decision with respect to the future of that facility when we are satisfied that we have all of the necessary information before us, and I can say to the honourable member and to members of the House that we want to have that information much sooner as opposed to later, because we understand there is some urgency with respect to proceeding with future decisions.
The honourable member Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, my final question will go to the Premier, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Premier is quoted directly from the Blue Book on page 24 as saying, and I quote, "I want our children to learn in a healthy, positive environment," unquote. My question to the Premier, Mr. Speaker, how does your government, Mr. Premier, explain this broken promise to the parents and children of Barrington, because obviously they are not learning in a healthy and positive environment?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And with the commitment in mind that the member opposite just brought to the attention of the House, that is the very reason that we are going and doing the extensive engineering study of the Barrington School to make sure that this government does keep its commitment to the children of Barrington and they are allowed to be educated in a very healthy environment.
The Honourable Member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A group of Barrington Passage parents have come to the House today because they're being forced to send their children to a school that's making them sick. This government won't give these parents and these students any answers. And now, even their requests to transfer their sick children are being denied. Last week in this House, Mr. Speaker, I brought forward the case of Tyrell Goodwin. And the morning after I did that, Tyrell's mother received a call that he could transfer to Drumlin Heights. And on Monday, Tyrell was in that school. My question to the Minister of Education, why is your department stopping sick children in Barrington Passage from transferring to other nearby schools?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The question of the transferring of students to other schools is a question which is determined by the school board in that particular area, or in any other area for that matter. And I do know that my Deputy Minister has been in communication with officials of that school board with respect to this particular question.
The Honourable Member Timberlea Prospect on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, students such as Titus and Alex, Samantha and Sinead have all been denied transfers to the school. And I'm going to table a letter from Samantha Freilich to the minister's attention. And I'd like to quote from it, if I could, Mr. Speaker, just a few lines. I want to get transferred to Drumlin Heights because in my other school I can't concentrate on my work. I'm getting really bad headaches, not breathing well, and when I get home from school, I don't want to do anything but lay around. Samantha's mother is here today. It's time for the minister and this government to stop playing politics with this school situation. I have a list of 9 students, and I'm going to transfer. Who want an immediate transfer. I am going to table that list of 9 students for the minister's attention. Minister, will you ensure that these students receive the transfers they need, or will I have to bring each one of their cases up in this House individually to further embarrass this government?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me say to the honourable member and to members of the House that the actions taken by this government will be in the interest of the students and will have nothing to do with the level of embarrassment the honourable member is able to generate or not generate. And I can say to the honourable member that the question of these transfers will be the subject of one of the subjects of a meeting that will be held next week with people from that area. Thank you.
Honourable Member Timberley Prospect on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to just correct what that minister just said. The subject of a meeting of the transfer of those students should be held here at 2:17 when those people in that gallery meet you when you go out that door, because you deserve the opportunity to hear from them firsthand about their sick children. I want a commitment today, Mr. Minister. 2:17, will you meet with those parents?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I would have been available to meet with those parents much earlier in the day had I not been occupied with estimates for a period of 4 hours, and it is expected that I attend here at question period, and when I am available I'll be happy to meet with people.
Member of Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This question is to the Minister of Health Promotion, whatever that means. Today, the Nova Scotia Gaming Foundation released its first annual report. According to the report, the foundation gave $600,000 for projects and $807,000 in grants for 2002. The total since 1998 is $2.4 million in grants and projects, and a total of $4 million sitting in the coffers for community projects. My question to the Minister of Health Promotion: do you honestly think that $2.4 million over 5 years is going to allow communities to offer meaningful help to problem gamblers?
Good question. Honourable Minister of Health Promotion.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for the question. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I have met with the chair of the foundation just in the past couple of weeks to discuss that very matter, Mr. Speaker. The foundation is quite interested, Mr. Speaker, in furthering future dollars to projects around the province, Mr. Speaker, and I can assure the honourable member, since my time as minister, and I know the previous minister, we want to see those dollars get out to projects, very needy projects across our province.
Honourable Member of Timberley Prospect on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the same 5-year period that I mentioned earlier, the Nova Scotian Gaming Corporation made over $1 billion in profits. In 2002, the Gaming Corporation invested 1/5 of 1%, 0.2% projects and grants so communities can help problem gamblers and their families. So my question to the minister is, when will your government start adequately addressing the devastation caused by gaming addictions in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Health Promotions.
Mr. Speaker, obviously the member is confused because there's also addiction services, which is through the district health authorities across this province, which invest millions of dollars in helping those with addictions across our province, Mr. Speaker.
Emily Prospect on your final supplementary.
I knew that. That's a given. That's a given. It's that minister and the dollars available that you're making the decisions on. This Tory government, like the Liberals before them, are the biggest addicts of all. It's like getting the gambling revenue, but they hate to help the people who provide it. The first step towards recovery is admitting you have a problem, and this government has a problem with its addiction to the gambling profits. So I asked the Minister of Health Promotions, whatever that means, why can't you simply admit that this province doesn't care where gambling revenues come from or who it hurts, as long as the money keeps rolling on in?
Now, Minister of Health Promotion.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure that honourable member, Mr. Speaker, that the dollars which are there currently with the foundation will be used for projects, Mr. Speaker. We are working very closely with the Gaming Foundation. In fact, I met with them, as I mentioned, a couple of short weeks ago. There's many good projects out there to be invested in, and I can assure the member that we will continue to invest in those worthwhile projects.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Health Promotion. The Minister spoke of his commitment improving health of Nova Scotians when the chronic disease prevention strategy is released this coming fall. And we know this strategy is being developed by key health stakeholders who want long-range plans and the government to continue consulting with them to bring about necessary changes. And these groups, Mr. Speaker, understand the crisis in Nova Scotia with the high rates of chronic illnesses, where there's concern that these stakeholders will not be included in the implementation process. My question to the minister, will this minister give his assurance that these stakeholders will remain actively involved so that the strategy recommendations will not be compromised?
The Honourable Minister of Health Promotion.
Yes.
The Honourable Member of Dartmouth East on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that the department has ongoing contact with these health groups to address the chronic illnesses in Nova Scotia, 40% of which we're told are preventable. And we also know that if this strategy that we're looking forward to is properly monitored, it will dramatically improve the health of Nova Scotians. But proper implementation must include both funding and political commitment to ensure that the strategy recommendations go a long way in addressing the rates of chronic disease. The question to the minister, will the minister provide assurances today that his office will provide the necessary funding resources to fully implement the recommendations of the chronic disease prevention strategy?
The Honourable Minister of Health Promotion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. Indeed, the chronic disease prevention strategy, Mr. Speaker, will be a very important framework for us to work through the Office of Health Promotion and for ourselves as a government. And I can assure that member, Mr. Speaker, we will be working very closely with those groups involved in putting together that strategy, and we will be moving forward on many initiatives with respect to that strategy.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East on your final supplementary.
Well, that's good to hear, Mr. Speaker, because to build the Office of Health Promotion, this government has decided to pull the resources from other departments and only then to claim that this office is properly funded to meet the health needs of Nova Scotians. This government talks about health, but the reality is that without the resources for this office, this government will fail to address those health needs of Nova Scotians. My question, can the minister explain why he says he wants to address smoking rates among Nova Scotians, yet he is not doing more to properly fund and to support the tobacco control strategy? There seems to have been a deliberate decision to ignore strategies that would reduce the high rates of smoking in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Minister of Health Promotion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And in fact, we put an additional $250,000 towards the strategy in this year's budget, Mr. Speaker. And I think that is a significant contribution with respect to all the already dollars which are there. And Mr. Speaker, I would have no problem in comparing what we put towards our tobacco strategy with what the previous Minister of Health put towards his strategy.
Now a member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Economic Development. In this House yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I asked the Minister regarding the Gleis Bay Revitalization Project. Now, Mr. Speaker, there's 3 partners involved in there, and there should be a 4th, which should have been the provincial government. So everyone knows this is a very worthwhile project. All parties agree to it. So I want to ask the Minister straight out, why haven't you, as the lead minister, seen fit to support this project?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when others seem fit and see fit that we're fully engaged in the process, that's when we'll be there. We've been at the table whenever we've been asked to coordinate and collaborate. And as I mentioned yesterday, we are meeting within government to look at all the plans for Cape Breton and elsewhere in the province.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre on your first supplementary.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, I'll read from this document, then I'll table it, Mr. Speaker. It's a letter to the Minister from the Mayor of the CBRM, and it's dated September 5th. And it says, Dear Minister Clark, at its September 3, 2002 meeting, CBRM Municipal Council has directed that I request a meeting with you, myself, and a delegation of councillors to discuss possible provincial investment in downtown Gleis Bay Revitalization Project. Why didn't you answer this letter?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, there has been constant and continuous dialogue with members of the CBRM, and there's other history other than one letter from the CBRM relating any development projects in that area.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton Centre on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, clearly he says in one breath that I've not been contacted. Now, when we table the hard evidence that he has been contacted, he gives a strange answer as usual, Mr. Speaker. I don't know whether it's the bright lights of the big city that he's forgotten his home area, Mr. Speaker, that's been devastated by the closure of the coal mines, and whether he doesn't see the effect of what's happening in towns like New Waterford and Gleis Bay. I want to ask him, why have you turned your back on Gleis Bay?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, I don't need the likes of that member to remind me of my roots. It's my roots that I dedicate here in this House, and it's my roots that are seeing Cape Breton moving forward. And that man should be ashamed of himself for his actions in this House to question my integrity and my commitment to the people of Nova Scotia and Cape Breton. It's solid, it's strong, and we're there when we're needed and where we're needed.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will not ask the Minister of Economic Development a question because I'm concerned about his blood pressure. My question is for the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, earlier today during estimates, the Minister of Education apprised members of the committee that the province is contemplating taking over transportation and facilities operations from the school boards in the province of Nova Scotia. Would the Minister of Education please apprise members of the House as to what cost efficiencies his government expects to derive by this action?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the premise upon which the honourable member's question is based is not an accurate premise, and the honourable member, despite my efforts to indicate to him during estimates that that was only one option that was being considered, he chose to take that as being his conclusion that in fact is where we're going to go. Mr. Speaker, we will consider a number of options relative to this particular question.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when one reviews Hansard, they'll draw their own conclusions. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the Minister even indicated that the government is contemplating introducing legislation in the spring of 2004 to arrive at the objective that the government contemplates. Further, Mr. Speaker, he tabled a letter that was signed by his predecessor in the department, which clearly indicates that legislation would be introduced in the spring of 2004. That letter is tabled. And one of the more concerning notes, Mr. Speaker, is that, and I quote, "No further consultation on this topic is planned." Mr. Speaker, would the Minister of Education please apprise members of this House and all the school board members across the province, all the parents, all the teachers, all the students, as to why the government is contemplating this very heavy-handed backroom approach to changing management in education.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
My predecessor just said, "It's hardly be back room if it's in a letter, Mr. Speaker." We're open and above board with respect to our intentions and the process of consultation. And it only goes to show how desperate that crew is for an issue, Mr. Speaker, when they can take one word and twist it into a whole course of action, which we have not decided upon. We have looked at a number of different options. They choose to pick something that they hope will be an issue that can stick, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell the honourable member he can huff it, he can puff it, he can blow, but he's not going to influence or alter our intentions with respect to how we govern. The legislation will deal with governance, and that has been made necessary as a result of the Financial Measures Act of 2 years ago.
Honourable member for Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Financial Measures Act of 2 years ago had a very specific clause in there to force all school boards and all municipalities and all agencies and boards and commissions of the government to go online with the SAP program, which is the financial management systems for the province of Nova Scotia. So 2 years ago, the government set it up, this process, to take over control of the school boards. And the minister is effectively admitting to that today. He wants to centralize education in downtown Halifax and take it away from the communities across Nova Scotia. My question to the Premier is, how can you stand with any sense of integrity and allow this type of backroom process to continue, which was never made public until today?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite may have a point, but certainly he's not making his point very clear. Perhaps he could write a letter.
The Honourable member for Halifax, Shabakto.
Bye-bye, Russell.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take up with the Minister of Energy the topic that we were cut off with in question period yesterday. Yesterday was the day in which the Electricity Marketplace Governance Committee released its second interim report. This is the committee that's been set up to look at ways to deregulate the electricity industry and introduce competition into it. Unfortunately, this committee has not been meeting in public. It would be desirable if this process were opened up because, as we all know, deregulation and competition in provinces like Ontario and Alberta, and of course in California, have led to high volatility in electricity prices. The committee yesterday recommended that competition be opened up in the electricity market to some 26% of the market, essentially the very large electricity consumers, the industrial consumers. But I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, about the rest of us who would remain captive as customers of Nova Scotia Power, that is, ordinary residents, and I'm wondering what the minister is proposing to protect the rest of us residential customers should that happen. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you very much, and it is a very good question the honourable member raises. I believe he misinterprets the recommendation, though. The recommendation is actually to go very slow, a measured stage process where it would just be the wholesale market, which is 1.6% of the electricity supply that would be the initial start. The document is a discussion that will occur with Nova Scotians and the industry, and the observation of higher rates would be part of that discussion.
The Honourable member for Halifax, Shabakto, on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I did read the document, and 1.6% is Nova Scotia Power's position. What's being recommended by the committee is that the initial opening up of the market go to the 26%. Mr. Speaker, this question of deregulation and increased competition is a difficult one. It's the predecessor to this government that privatized Nova Scotia Power in 1992, and they do seem very dedicated to increased privatization of the electricity marketplace in a new way. We've seen brownouts in electricity delivery in a province like Ontario under the privatization model. We've seen serious fluctuations in price in many provinces that have tried this and in the United States. What I would like is an assurance from the minister that he does not equate competition with deregulation. I would like the minister's assurance that even if there is increased competition, that there will still be strict regulation of the electricity industry in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you very much. And again, I believe the honourable member, if he examined the document closer, that he would find it is the wholesale market that not only the interim report but the final report recommends. And certainly it's the position of this government that any opening of the market will be a staged, slow process that will take into account stable prices for as much as possible for Nova Scotia consumers. We'll also take into consideration opportunities for cogen, as the energy strategy speaks to, and as well a much larger role for wind power and other renewable energy sources that are very valuable to the province and create some entrepreneurship as well.
The member for Halifax, Shabak, on your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't want the minister to think that I did not notice that he didn't answer the question. My final point, though, is that the whole process that we're engaged in these two 50-page reports that we've had from the Electricity Marketplace Governance Committee is driven by an energy strategy that should be primarily designed to reduce our greenhouse gases. That is to say, it's within the context of our Kyoto commitments. That should be paramount, and I'm wondering, since the minister has established this committee, which seems to be focusing almost exclusively on deregulation and increased competition, whether he is prepared to establish a similar committee to deal with how we are going to reduce our greenhouse gases.
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you very much. And the committee made a number of recommendations. They deal with transmission, access for privates and renewables to the grids, efficiency, and marketplace governance. And the issues that the member is concerned about are certainly issues addressed in there. And the advice given to me by the chairman, Mr. Fournier, certainly are the facts that I put forward this afternoon.
The Honourable Member of Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in anticipation the Minister of Economic Development's blood pressure is down, I will ask him a question. Mr. Speaker, between November 6, 2001 and December 31, 2002, the Nova Scotia Business Inc. approved 15 loans for companies across Nova Scotia. Out of that, only one was from Cape Breton, and that amounted to 0.3% of the total dollars that were loaned out. Ironically, there were 10 companies in Cape Breton, from Cape Breton that made application. My question to the minister is, why is it that Nova Scotia Business Inc. loaned so little money to Cape Breton businesses, and recognizing that he gave me some leveraged positions there earlier in the day?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I committed to the member previously in question period to provide him with some details as a result of a previous question, what we do know of the 198 current files within NSBI for business accounts, 48 of those are from Cape Breton. We have had a total of 71 inquiries, of that 10 from Cape Breton up till the end of March of 2003. We currently just went through a process where there have been 2 of the Capital Idea Road shows in Cape Breton, and 30 businesses in each location participating in that. We expect more inquiries to go up, and obviously we're working very aggressively, and so is NSBI, in increasing the number of accounts and investments in the island.
Now, Member Cape Breton West, on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Cape Breton businesses received 0.3% of all the dollars that were loaned by Nova Scotia Business Inc. This at the same time that the Nova Scotia government, the Department of Economic Development, reduced the staff in the Sydney office from 12 to 3, one of which is part-time. Why is the minister not doing more for Cape Breton in light of the fact that he says he has a commitment and deep roots in Cape Breton.
Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to add to the member's statement, we have now 3 members in the Sydney Office of Economic Development, as well as in the Strait area employee there. NSBI has an account executive in Port Hawkesbury. There's an account executive being recruited for the Sydney office. We have a representative in the Cape Breton Growth Fund. Mr. Speaker, our $12 million investment in the Growth Fund has been added by additional over $8 million in other investments as a result of that. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, Enterprise Cape Breton Corporation is very well known as a first point of contact given the federal government's investment, and we've been there as a partner, and the outcomes speak for themselves.
Now, Member Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, they closed Sydney Steel because they said it was a drain on the taxpayers. That saved them $35 million a year, granted, times 4, that's over $140 million. And they put back $3 million a year and expect us to be grateful. Mr. Speaker, the minister has indicated earlier that in the week that he's not getting along with CBRM officials. He's indicated he's not getting along with the federal officials. When is he going to start getting along with various stakeholders and do something for Cape Breton?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, what the honourable member has highlighted is this government's ability to get greater outcomes with the resources that Nova Scotians provide us, because there's more people working in Cape Breton today than when the Liberals were in government. There's more opportunities being realized today than when the Liberals were there, Mr. Speaker, and that's why we are here to partner and cooperate, and the outcomes, again, speak for themselves.
The Honourable Member for Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, McNabb's Island and Lawler's Island are an integral part of the community of Eastern Passage, both historically and in the present terms. Now, Department of Natural Resources, Mr. Speaker, is producing a management plan with regard to the development of the new park on those islands. So my question to the Minister of Natural Resources is, when can he tell us that management plan will be finished and published for the public?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the question from the member opposite. He's absolutely right. We did go out with a number of public consultation processes to get the feedback from the community as to what they wanted or didn't want on the McNabbs and Lawler Islands Provincial Park. We are now going through that information. We had a very good response from the public, and it will take some time for our Parks Division to go through that and balance that with the goals and objectives of the overall provincial park development program. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Harbour Eastern Passage on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I noted, those islands are an integral part of the community of Eastern Passage, and the people in Eastern Passage think it's very important that any management plan reflect the fact that they are an integral part of our community. So my question to the Minister of Natural Resources is, can he make a commitment here today that the management plan for the islands will reflect their integral part of the community of Eastern Passage?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, the honourable member is absolutely right. The McNabbs and Lawler Islands are a very integral part of the society in Eastern Passage, and it is our plan once the program is put together and the results of the discussions are carried on, that we will go back to the community and discuss it with them and get their input on the final program.
Time allotted for a question period has expired. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask for the concurrence of the House to revert back to tabling reports, regulations, and other papers.
Is it agreed? Table reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Speaker, I want to thank the honourable House leaders for agreeing. Speaker, I beg leave to table. No, it's not, Speaker. I beg leave to table the amendments to the Comprehensive Integrated Tax Coordination Agreement, which governs the harmonized sales tax as set out in a letter from the Minister of Finance for the Government of Canada dated April 8, 2003. The province of Nova Scotia, as well as New Brunswick and Newfoundland and Labrador, have signed and entered into this technical agreement to amend the Comprehensive Integrated Tax Coordination Agreement. It's a technical letter, Mr. Speaker. The amendments to Annex A of the CITCA relate to specific aspects of the HST revenue allocation formula which determine the provincial share of national GST HST revenues. With those very short, very clear comments, Mr. Speaker, I will table the documents, as I pointed out. I want to thank again the members for doing that.
The documents are tabled. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know members probably want to get going, but I beg their indulgence. I'd like to make an introduction. In the East Gallery are two gentlemen that are with Pork Nova Scotia, the President, Mr. Herman Burflow, and the CEO, Henry Vissers, and I'd like members of the House to give them the usual warm welcome.
We welcome our guests to the gallery today, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House will now rise to meet again on Tuesday at the hour of 2 p.m. The House will sit until 10. Following the daily routine, we'll go on a question period and then into supply for 4 hours. And following that, Mr. Speaker, we'll start debate on Bill number 36, the Financial Measures Act. And we will take the moment of interruption, Mr. Speaker, at the normal time of 6 p.m.
Motion is the House adjourned to 2 p.m. on Tuesdays. Agreed? All those in favour say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. The House adjourned to 2 p.m. on Tuesday.